Welcome back, everyone, to another Mast Cell 360 show. I am Jamie Fries-Miller, your host and health coach here at Mast Cell 360. Whether you're joining us live right now or catching the replay later, we're so glad to have you with us. These lives are all about empowering you on your mast cell journey with practical insights, expert guidance, and the support of our amazing community. I'm so excited to welcome today's guest, Fletcher Johnson. Fletcher is actually a personal acquaintance and friend of mine, and we first met through a family friend, but quickly bonded over our love of all things wellness. We've also walked similar healing paths, and I'm going to introduce her in just a second. We're also going to be joined by our lead practitioner, Kimberly Quirk, who you guys know if you've been around for a while. Sorry, there's a puppy barking in the background if you guys can hear that. For those who don't know, we recently got a puppy, and it's only like 9 weeks old now, so she just woke up, I can tell you. She should make a cameo, because who doesn't love a puppy? All right, before we jump into today's show, quick disclaimers. This presentation is for informational and educational purposes. It's not meant to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent illness. Be sure to discuss any health recommendations with your healthcare provider. And I see everyone joining us live now. Feel free to drop in the comments where you're tuning in from. I see Jane is tuning in from South Dakota. All right. Just a reminder that some of the links shared during this presentation are, or on our website, are affiliate links, which means Mast Cell 360 may take a very small commission if you purchase through our link. We only recommend products that we love, have used personally, or use in the Mast Cell 360 clinic. All right, we see Jocelyn from Ohio, T from, I think, MN. Oh, my geography. Is that Minnesota? Maybe Tracy from Oregon Coast. Thanks for being with us, guys. All right. So what are we going to be talking about today? We are going to go over why dysfunctional breathing patterns are so common in chronic illness. Maybe you yourself have noticed some breathing issues. I myself, this is a really important topic to me. I myself have suffered from air hunger. If you've been watching the show, you probably know that about me. So breathing has always been a big part of my own healing journey and figuring out what's going on there. And Flethcher has, even within the last 6 months, has taught me a lot. So we're really glad to have her. We're going to be doing a simple diaphragmatic breathing practice that you can use. And we're going to be talking about how really small but consistent shifts can build real stability over time. And of course, if we have time, we'll do a live Q&A. So as we're going over during the show, feel free to drop your comments or your questions into the comment section. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, you have to be logged in order to participate in the live Q&A. The questions we ask, you keep them on topic of today's show. So nervous system and breathing for healing and wellness. And please understand we're unable to answer in-depth personal health questions. So I'm going to bring up both Kimberly Quirk and Flethcher to the stage now. Flethcher is a certified yoga therapist and an Ayurvedic Digestive Health Coach. She's the founder of Elevate Your Health, LLC. She helps people living with chronic illness build nervous system resilience through breath, grounding, and mindful movement. Through her own journey with mold, Lyme, and mast cell activation, she discovered how correcting dysfunctional breathing patterns could reduce fatigue, anxiety, inflammation, and digestive issues. So today, through her Rooted program and private work, Flethcher guides others by offering simple and safe practices that create lasting stability, especially for those with sensitivities and are on healing journeys. So welcome, Flethcher. We're so glad to have you with us today.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to bring down our slides real quick so we can see more of the three of us. All right. So for our audience just meeting you, would you mind sharing a little bit about what you do and who you help?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on here today. As Jamie mentioned, I am a certified yoga therapist, which means that I have met a 200-hour training, a 500-hour training, and then went on later in life when I decided I really wanted to sink my teeth into topics for a master's in science program in yoga therapy, which means that I do a lot of problem solving. And so when people go to a general yoga class, it has lots of wonderful benefits, one of them being stress reduction. Many people come to that, and pain reduction. But a lot of times we need more specific tools, or you may have multiple different things that you're working on, and there is a vast amount of choices within the yoga pantheon. And so matching up the right tools for someone's specific needs can fast forward you on that track. And so that's what yoga therapy has done for me. And then during COVID, I went back and did some additional training. I'm an education junkie, and as an Ayurvedic digestive health coach. And so Ayurveda and yoga are sister sciences, which means that culturally, 5,000 years ago, they were in the same environment. They are both sciences, lifestyle recommendations, so to speak. And Ayurveda works a lot on people's personal constitutions. That's based on time of life, time of year, routine, diet, lifestyle, all of these things that we are born with, but also are coming in from our external environment, and how to balance those things for individuals. And of course, you see patterns then developing as well.
Yeah, and I think that was a great overview too, because like you said, so many people find themselves in yoga classes, and we often do like a nervous system evaluation. It's like, what do you do to relax? And some people are like, oh, I go to yoga. And we often find like that's not enough. But also one of the things that I thought about the other day was, in the work that I've personally done with you, most yoga classes they're like, oh, inhale on this movement and exhale on that movement. But it's like, are you doing an inhale and an exhale correctly? And I saw a quote the other day. It was like, what did it say? Yoga, because the chaos doesn't have a pause button. And I'm like,
yes.
So yeah, there's definitely benefits to yoga. But like you just said, incorporating the right tools for that individual, then pairing it with the movement can enhance and just amplify and speed up the healing maybe.
Absolutely.
Okay. So like many people in our community, you personally have dealt with mold, Lyme, and more recently learned about Mast Cell Activation Syndrome. So what has that experience been like for you? Because I think just sharing those stories can be really affirming for people.
Well, I don't know if I was born tired, but I have been tired for a long time. And since middle school, high school, people have been testing me for thyroid and this and that and everything under the sun. There's always those things, but nothing ever came back. And for a long time, many years, I realized that when I was speaking to people that had autoimmune diseases, I felt like they were speaking my language, but I never had that diagnosis. And after I moved home from college back in the area, I started feeling kind of funky and gaining weight. I thought I would go on a health kick, and I started eating whole wheat everything. That's when I realized I need to be gluten-free. But more specifically, I realized that I had MTHFR, which is a whole nother topic. But sorry, I just completely lost my train of thought. Bring me back in here. Oh, how does that come into? So on the eastern shore of Maryland, Lyme disease is an epidemic. It's very moist, it's very hot, damp. There's also a lot of colonial homes that have mold, and as a lot of people know, these things are synergistic. And I remember going to the doctor and him telling me like, yes, we're going to put you on meds, but I have a feeling that you're going to want to do this the hard way. And because the mold and Lyme shrunk up my capillaries, I was even more fatigued. And he told me that I was to ride a stationary bike for 5 minutes a day. And that was it, maximum. But I was supposed to do it every day. And eventually this grew to 7 minutes to 9 minutes, all the way up to 15. And when I got to 15, I would go back to 5 and do another level. And he warned me, there's going to be days that you feel really good and you're going to want to do more. and you will. But then the pendulum will swing back the other way. And boy, has this been a life lesson for me forever in energy management. Because when you feel good, you just want to go and do all of the different things and do it while you can, but then you pay for it on the other side. And so learning how to self-regulate in order to have more even energy versus this uneven energy has been a huge life lesson for me, and a challenging one, but one that I keep coming back to. And learning about mast cell has been even more beneficial because it's been going on for a long time, but I didn't know. And once you have the knowledge, then you can make the appropriate shifts in your life that you need to. And this was like a missing puzzle piece for me. It was a hard pill to swallow at first and very humbling. But now I realize that I can find community within that. I can research that. I can understand more of, when I do this, this is why this happens. And these are things that I can do to support myself. And so even though I wish that I didn't have this, I do, but I'm really glad to know, because now I can live a better, more fulfilling life for it.
Yeah. Kimberly's over there like nodding along. I want to pass the torch for her real quick, because what you talked about, like the titrating of the exercise, I feel like
yeah, it's exactly what we do with supplements, right? Like if people are reactive. Yeah. So I love that. Yeah.
You can titrate nervous system, you can titrate exercise, you can titrate supplements, you can titrate food. So I think that's a beautiful lesson. And then just like the recognition and awareness of, if I push, I'm going to pay for it.
Yeah. And we always want to do all the things at once, and taking those baby steps with one thing at a time is really so beneficial, because then you know what's working and how it's working. Because if you did 3 things at the same time and something didn't work, you wouldn't know which of those things, and you have to start the little experiment with yourself all over again, which isn't always very fun.
Yeah. So let's get into like kind of the meat of today. Thank you so much for sharing some of your personal story. But I want to know, what led you to discover the connection between breathing and symptoms? Was it personal discovery, or one that maybe you discovered during your training as a yoga therapist?
I would definitely say both, because breathing is very special. It's one of those things where it's happening all the time, whether you realize it or not, but you can also observe it, change it, regulate it. And when you're doing anything, but especially yoga, your breathing is kind of your temperature gauge for where your nervous system is regulating. So if you think about you're driving and somebody swerves in front of you and you go, that is a nervous system reaction. Or lots of times we're holding our breath. And so when we can begin to observe those things, it can give us an indicator of, this is too much right now, when maybe the other symptoms are when it's screaming. It's a more subtle symptom that helps people curb these things, catch them in advance. You could be standing in the grocery store line and realize, oh my goodness, now I'm hyperventilating, and stop the spiral before it begins. And so I have had many life-altering situations where breathing has come to the rescue, including emergency situations. But dysfunctional breathing, outside of just being a chest breather, common things that we've heard of, I actually never knew about until I went to grad school. And then I realized, wow, this is really common. So in a group class, I would see maybe 1 out of every 20 people dysfunctionally breathing. But in my private practice, it was more 1 out of 4. And then if you bring it to a smaller scope with autoimmune, it is extremely common, especially with things like air hunger and different nervous system, anxiety, things going on. To me, it's the missing piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. So so you kind of alluded to like autoimmune conditions, like when your sample size shrinks, and obviously people come to practitioners like yourself or Mast Cell 360 because they are experiencing conditions, right? Why is dysfunctional breathing? Why are dysfunctional breathing patterns so common in people with chronic illness?
So the really beautiful thing about the breath is it's intricately woven with the nervous system. And for those that don't know, there's a fight-fight response, which I'm going to equate to hitting the gas pedal. And then there's the rest and digest response, which can be like hitting the brakes. We're just slowing down. And so when our body is having too many browsers open, fighting all of these symptoms, diseases, and all of the different cofactors that come along with mast cell or causes, then things kind of jump into this panic mode, stress mode. The body is doing a lot for us all the time. When we layer in all of these other things, it's stressful. But by knowing our breath, we can essentially send our body a signal that it is safe. And in safety is where more healing happens, because nobody's worried about digesting a cheeseburger when that tiger is chasing them, But when we're safe, then our body can be free to have the ability to send the troops where it needs to go to heal the things that are at the forefront.
Kimberly, you had a question about hypoxia, which we've identified as one of like the main triggers of MCAS. Do you want to ask Fletcher that question now?
Yeah, we know hypoxia, which is like low oxygen in the body, is a source of stress, right? And it's a mast cell trigger. So we can see that sometimes if somebody goes to elevation, right, it could be a mast cell trigger, like if you're at altitude, or on a plane even, because the altitude might be set higher than what you're normal. That was the early sign for mast cell. When I look back to my 20s when I was traveling on planes, I would be so fatigued after flying, way more than any of my colleagues. So then the question comes back to, let me see what I exactly wrote. Yeah, so like more like the shallow breathing or the breath hold, even like I know in myself, I tend to do breath holding, and it's like almost like bracing, which is, I think, a learned behavior. Would love to hear your perspectives on that.
Sure. And if I don't say anything about learned behavior, circle me back to that because it's very interesting. So the breathing is a bit chicken or the egg, which came first. And the answer is it can be both. So when you have that external stimulus, the car cutting in front of you, it's going to snap you into that. But if everything was perfectly fine and all of a sudden I just decided I'm going to start hyperventilating right now, it's going to send my body into that process. And what's very interesting about learned behavior is if you've ever snuggled with somebody and then you notice all of a sudden that your breathing is synced up, it's kind of like a natural occurrence. I'm not quite sure why, but it happens when people are very close. So it could be a mother with a baby or friends, lovers, whatever it might be in close proximity. Even if energetically you were around somebody that's really wound up, you're going to feel, you walk into the group of people and you can kind of feel their energy. Sometimes you take it on, but you also have the power to make that shift once you have an awareness in it. So I would say that the lack of breathing, back to like a group yoga class, when people say more breathing, breathe deeper, more often, it's always more, right? That's not always the case, because if you're breathing shallowly and you do more of it, you're going to create that stress response, the panic response in the body. But somebody might not realize that they're chest breathing, and so they're trying to do it more. But when the diaphragm can properly extend and you can get the air all the way in, and as actually, as JB and I talked about, sometimes the issue is actually not getting all of the air out, because you can't bring more air in if it hasn't completely emptied. So if we think about it as a balloon, if that balloon is stretched to its max, it can't go any further. But if we let the balloon fully empty, then we can get that full healing breath with rich oxygen in to nourish our systems.
I totally forgot about that part about empty until you just did that. Yeah, sometimes, and that's a good point. Like sometimes you have to hear things like multiple times in order for it to really sink in. So revisiting this, I think people might need to rewatch this replay a couple times.
Also really interesting about diaphragmatic breathing too, right? Because it has to do, it's a dome. I'm facing right underneath of my rib cage. But when we're doing a lot of exercising, exercise is also a stressor. And so you could be holding a plank pose, right? Most people agree that that is stressor. But if you are breathing, I will use the term properly, loosely, then you can be at ease in that plank. But if you're breathing improperly, then it's going to tell the body, it's going to start freaking out like, oh, I can't do this anymore. Which is even more interesting because when people start to engage their core, they're squeezing their stomachs, and sometimes their diaphragm doesn't have anywhere to go. So it's almost creating this chest breathing effect by the nature of the beast. But there are other places the breath can go, even when those muscles are engaged, to keep the body safe. We just need to learn them and explore them.
Yeah, that was.
I feel like she's reading my mind because literally that's happening to me when I'm going to the gym. Like I'm fine on like everything else, but you try to do a plank and it's automatic breath hold. And then it's panic, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, I can't hold this for a minute, right? Or 30 seconds because I'm holding my breath. And then, and then your body's in a fight or flight response. So that's really
You are not alone.
Yes. No, and absolutely. One of the things that I think, because exercise is like a goal, is such big goals for a lot of our audience. They may not be there yet. But like when I did my in-person session with you, Fletcher, like one of the things that stuck with me was realizing how much my pelvic floor was also connected to that, and like the core engagement piece, and how like by the end of our session, you're like, this is how you can turn just a simple breathing exercise into a core exercise where you're actually strengthening those muscles. And so like I'm thinking about like that session all the time, and like how I can like release more, like unconsciously forgetting the piece about releasing more of the air, but like how I'm using my body and like the different muscles more. I just want to throw up some of the comments that I'm seeing, because like Kimberly mentioned the breath hold, and you've mentioned the breath hold, and Teresa's saying, I don't know why or how I ended up here, but yes, I'm here for it. I tend to hold my breath for no good reason. Teresa, if you've never been to Mast Cell 360 before, maybe you found us through Flethcher or somewhere else, the universe brought you here. Like, I just want to say welcome. You are not alone. And then Mandy said, well, you're talking about Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, they say long breath, long life. So throwing that out there. All right. So we've talked about dysfunctional breathing, but we haven't defined it yet. So what are some signs that someone might not even realize they have dysfunctional breathing? So like, what might that look like? For me, it was like realizing the reverse breathing. So maybe that would be helpful. Like, can we define dysfunctional breathing and how people may be aware that that's something they're doing?
Sure. And the air hunger that you mentioned would definitely be another one. Panic attacks is definitely a good indicator. High anxiety, even though those aren't actual breathing patterns, they go alongside, they're holding each other's hands. So dysfunctional breathing, say you were to time how many breaths you were to have within 1 minute. Maybe it's around 12. If it's above 20, that would be considered a pretty rapid breath. If it's, 6 breaths in a minute, that would be pretty slow. And so, of course, there's kind of a median range, and there's going to be exceptions on either end of it. But if it's really extreme, that could be a good indicator. Another thing would be the length of the actual inhale and the length of the actual exhale. So if you were to count those, sometimes what happens, we'll just say that when the nervous system and all is well and good, they're probably going to be about the same. But what happens is sometimes the inhale becomes shorter or longer, or the exhale becomes shorter or longer. And there are appropriate times for all of these. But if we are just watching TV, having a relaxing time, hanging out with our friends, and these things are out of proportion, that could be an indicator. And sometimes when we go to count the breath also will not be even. One time it might be a 2, one time it might be a 6, one time it might be a 12, and it's back to 1. And then you're having inconsistencies could also be an indicator. There's lots of different we call the pranavayus. It's directions of the breath. And actually that will come in handy here. So the breath we can think about as an in and an out, but it also circulates around the body, right? It's going in the tissues, it's moving through different areas. And these vayus are what's called winds of the breath. When they are blowing too hard, so to speak, in a certain area, it can impact the trickle downhill effect. So what happens is apanavayu is the downward movement of breath. But what happens is things start going up, 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 and things get shorter, they get faster, they get higher. And that's what we're seeing a lot of times in chest breathing, hyperventilation, reverse breathing, any of those types of things. It's like the energy is not going down and up like a wave. It just keeps creating this feeling of upness. And so hopefully we'll be able to help people identify where their breath is. And sometimes when we're not regulated, the breath is a bit like a bucking bronco, and we have to work to tame it a little bit. It's not always easy because it's a habit. And so it's a retraining, essentially. Oops, I can't hear you.
I'm just trying to minimize any background noise. You had talked about like learned behaviors too, like how we, and you just said unlearn. And we're going to be doing a breathing demonstration in a second. And we're going to talk about if you're in mold, you might not want to do those deep breaths because the body as a safety mechanism doesn't want to breathe in more of the mold. And I think that was a case with me because I think my mold exposure was in college when that air hunger developed. And so I started to learn this different way of breathing. And I had a cranial sacral practitioner, the osteopath who I get that work done with, basically told me I had to relearn to breathe recently. And that was, I think, either right before or right after I met with you, Fletcher. So I was like, all right, everything's aligning. Like I have to do this. So it's funny too, like when you talk about like the breathing, the counting and all doing kind of some of those self-assessments. I'm so funny because they always say, don't change your breath. And I'm like, well, now I'm consciously thinking about it. So it's so hard.
Yeah, right? Because people have an idea of what they're supposed to be breathing like, but whether they really are or not is a completely different story.
Yeah, exactly. And I've kind of trained myself that like if I'm reading a book or hear somebody say, take a deep breath, I literally stop and I will. But I'm almost wondering if like before I met with you, was I taking a proper deep breath?
I think I have the answer to that.
And there's so many different, I'm going to pass it over to Kimberly too, because she brought up such a good point, is that there's so many different types of breath work. And so Kimberly, do you want to ask Fletcher that question?
Yeah. So I made the mistake, right, early on in my chronic illness journey of doing some like activating breath or some Wim Hof type breath. I think it was called fire breathing or something. Definitely wasn't Wim Hof, but it was similar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so activating to our nervous system and then to the immune system and would cause a flare versus the kind that's calming. So I think would love to hear just your take on that and just best breath to do for mast cell kind of thing.
Sure. So breath of fire, Kapalabhati, as you were mentioning, is meant to stoke the flames. And a lot of times people are really tired, really fatigued, and it sounds good, right? And there absolutely is times when it is appropriate. But it's a sharp exhalation that's using the diaphragmatic breath And what typically happens is if people are not diaphragmatic breathing and they try to do Kapalabhati, they actually just start chest breathing, hyperventilating. So it's almost like we have to build that groundwork in order for that to be appropriate. And also know, hey, if I'm in a flare right now, maybe that's not the best breath for me. I really think that there are lots of different techniques, but building the foundation of knowing how to self-regulate first before trying all the different variables is really important. And so before you learn different breathing techniques, it's important to just explore, hey, what does my breath look like when I'm not trying to control it? And that, as you mentioned, Jamie, can be very hard to do, but I think it's really an integral process, because how can we know what we're changing or what our baseline is if we don't even know where we're starting?
Yeah.
I have another question. Can I ask about that's kind of related? Whether that would show up then in HRV, heart rate variability measures.
Yes, yes, thank you. This is also one of my favorite things. Okay, so every time we inhale, our heart rate goes up a little bit, and every time we exhale, it goes down a little bit, right? So we were talking about them being even, and so then your heart rate. But if you were to hyperventilate, your heart rate is also going up, and when you're anxious, your heart rate also goes up, and sometimes you feel it, and it makes it even worse. So yes, absolutely. Making a longer exhalation will slow your heart rate down, which is very handy to have in many situations.
Yeah, Jane is saying she's tried every yoga breathing during fight or flight and it doesn't work. So she starts breathing so fast she hyperventilates. So how can I calm it back down? Exhale more or longer? So would you say absolutely just try to extend that exhale?
I would say try to do even inhales and exhales. So first count and see where you are, find your baseline. So maybe it's a 2 inhale and a 2 exhale. Then slowly it would become a 3 inhale and a 3 exhale. And you could build it up to, a 10 count or something. And I would maybe do this at first, not in the yoga class. So build that skill first of what does it look like to extend the breath and feel safe. Because when we start throwing in other movement factors, especially if it's a fast class, we're going to go right back to that other habit. But if we learn how to do the 8 count breathing, which may or may not always be accessible, then when you get into those situations, you will already have the tool. And sometimes you just have to ignore what the teacher is saying, honestly, and do what you know is best for you. But if you're hyperventilating, then I would say there's a very good chance that you would benefit from learning diaphragmatic breathing practices just as a baseline, and then doing more with the adding in.
Yeah, and we call the equal inhale and exhale the resonant breathing. So we have a blog post on that behind the scenes Zach or Cam can throw into the comments for you, Jane.
And even when we were talking about earlier about life-changing things, I mentioned emergency events. One time I was on my way to the emergency room and I did square breathing, which is inhale for the same amount, hold it for the same amount, exhale for the same amount, hold it for the same amount. And honestly, that breath was my lifeline because it was over an hour away. I was in extreme pain, and focusing on that one thing is what got me there. So I'm not saying it's appropriate all the time, but it is a very handy tool in learning how to expand the breath in a safe way. And if you feel like you're stuck at that 2 or 3, just stay there. Don't push it any further until the breath itself is ready.
Yeah. Thank you.
I heard that the Navy SEALs use that box breathing.
They do.
Yeah.
To stay calm. Yeah.
So here at Mast Cell 360 and in the work that you do with your clients, we talk a lot about nervous system resilience. Can you explain how breathing directly impacts the nervous system, and then maybe why the breathing can affect like those symptoms like fatigue, anxiety, inflammation, and digestive issues?
Sure. Yeah, we were talking a little bit about how the in-breath is hitting the gas pedal and the exhale breath is, pumping the brakes a little bit. And that was a 2-part question.
Two-part question. Yeah. So we're trying to build the resilience. So how can like breathing directly impact the nervous system, which you did talk a little bit about. So maybe we want to focus on how can breathing affect those symptoms like fatigue, anxiety, inflammation, digestive issues.
Yes. So certain breathing techniques are going to calm you down, which sometimes people mistake for fatigue, but it's actually not quite the same thing. And there are certain breathing techniques that can give you more energy. And sometimes when people are too energized, they go into that panic state. And so it's really about learning your baseline and kind of coloring between the lines for a little while. And then just like when I was talking about riding the bicycle and just extending a little bit, or with the resonant breathing, maybe you just take it up by one, or maybe that day your bucket is already full and you make it easier on yourself, because the whole thing is you want to feel safe. Now, when we're building resilience, yeah, slowly we incrementally add in, but we have to figure out, because every day is going to feel different in our bucket, right? So if it's a day that we don't feel so good, the key is actually not pushing too far. It's just being consistent or even gentle. Now, if it is a day where you're feeling good, then you incrementally build out slowly but surely over time on a regular basis. That way it becomes safe, your body gets used to it, but you are building up, and then you're not jumping the gun and doing too much and throwing yourself into a space that's suddenly not safe.
I love
So
that you brought it.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I love that you brought up the bucket idea, because we talk about that a lot, like in the idea of the histamine bucket, and especially because majority of people with Mast Cell Activation Syndrome react to, like, they get more symptomatic when that histamine bucket's full, and stress is one of those triggers.
The breath is really beautiful because not only does it give you instant gratification, which it will, but it will also build and layer over time. So it's one of those things that you can use anytime, anywhere, without anybody knowing about it, and it will give you results. But the more you practice it, the better those results are going to be.
Yeah. All right. So I think we should go into the demo. We're going to give people a little tidbit to take away and start experimenting with their own breathing. And I think your demo, and if you weren't planning on answering this question during your demo, maybe you can weave it in. Amber's asking, what is reverse breathing? Because this was a huge insight for me. So,
yes.
And before I pass it over to you to do the demo and answer this question, I mentioned a little bit earlier that if you are in environmental mold right now, your body may not want to take that deep breath. So you may just want to watch today and do this later when you're able to go outside, or maybe you can go to an open window and do it there. If you're in a high pollen area and that's a huge trigger for you as well, just be mindful of what your individual triggers are and choose a location where it's going to feel safe to experiment with this breathing, because again, it's all about safety. Okay, Fletcher, I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right. So when we do our demo, we're just going to be exploring your natural breath. But just to give you a heads up on what reverse breathing is so that you can tuck that away, reverse breathing is when you're diaphragmatic breathing and you breathe in, the belly should move out as if you're filling up a balloon. Your navel will move away from your spine. And when you exhale, it will move towards your spine. Now, what happens in reverse breathing is when you inhale, the stomach is moving in and the air is coming up. And so if I was to reverse breathe right now, if you just watch my shoulders, it would look like this. Now it looks like I'm getting a full breath, but that breath had an upward quality to it, which we were talking earlier about this wave coming in and out. And so when we're diaphragmatically breathing, we're coming in and down, almost as if you could imagine you're breathing towards your feet. And then as you exhale, the diaphragm itself is squeezing the air up and out like you roll a tube of toothpaste. And so what I hear a lot of times people saying when they're trying this is, I feel like I'm doing the opposite. And so if you've ever done a yoga class or tried any type of breathing and it feels misaligned with the instructions, that's probably it. But I'm also happy to help you figure it out as well if you need more help.
Okay.
So let's figure out where it is that we are right now in this moment. Let's start by be finding yourself in just a comfortable position. So you could be seated, you could be standing. My personal preference is laying down. But if you're here, that might be a little bit triggering. So just take a moment to find yourself in a place where you could cultivate more ease. I would also invite you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable with this. If you don't feel comfortable with this, you're just going to kind of cast your eyes down and loosely focus them on something in front of you that's not moving, not active. This is just going to help to draw your senses inward since the breath is a bit more subtle. And so the first thing that you're going to do is bring your attention to your nostrils. And you're just going to notice the sensation of breath moving in and out of the body in this area. You might find it's more around the edges. Maybe it's in the center. Might even be a different temperature on the inhale or the exhale. So then you're going to shift your attention to the sinus cavity. As the breath comes in, it's moving from the nostrils up into the sinuses. And just take a moment to observe it in this area. That area is a space in itself. And the breath reaches then the top of the throat and makes a little U-turn. So now go ahead and watch your breath in the area of your throat. Now, many people also find that this is an area of constriction. So just observe. Does this area feel tight? And from the throat, you'll then focus on the area around the collarbones. Watching the breath here. How much does this area move as you breathe in and out? Finding your way around the heart center. And you may even find it helpful to take a hand there to feel it. As you breathe around the heart, you might notice, is it easy to breathe into this area? Or is it challenging? Maybe somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Moving your attention down into the front of the rib cage where we have an upside down V. You could take your hands there if you'd like. And this area expands and contracts with the breath. Maybe. Notice if what yours is doing. And below this V, you move down to the navel. Noticing how much or how little this area is moving. Is this area moving away from the body as you breathe in? Or is it moving towards the body as you breathe in? And then imagine the breath moving down into the pelvic bowl. Noticing how deep that breath travels. Is it open and receiving? Does it feel constricted? Can the breath access it at all? And now let's take a moment to connect the dots. Following this path from your nostrils all the way down to your pelvic floor as you watch the pattern of the breath without changing it, moving in and out of the body. And finally, you'll take one hand to the heart and one hand to the belly, and noticing the rhythm between the two. So when you're feeling ready, you can open your eyes and return into this surroundings and your space. And so this was your breath without making any changes at all. And I would love to hear what you found.
It's interesting, the idea of like where your energy goes. And so I found focusing on that throat, you mentioned it's constricting. I actually got air hunger in the same when we did this in person. And I was focusing on into the chest area. I felt that movement. I was able to bring myself more into that parasympathetic as I continued to follow my breath down further. So it just really goes to show, like, when you're consciously breathing, you can direct where that breath goes and change patterns. So, but I didn't make that connection the first time because I remember I'm like, why am I activated doing a breathwork exercise at your house, Fletcher? And now I'm like, oh my gosh, the same thing happened again because I'm consciously thinking about that constriction.
Yeah, and that can, even just that thought can be a stressor sometimes.
Yeah, I actually recently came to the conclusion that I'm very grateful for my air hunger because it's like my gauge of, am I in a stress state or not? And I have that power to change. Yeah.
And you know, sometimes we get judgmental about ourselves too. And so even just observing, there's this layer of, am I doing it right? What should I be doing? This and that. And it kind of creates the spirals of the thoughts. And sometimes we just need to be with where we are.
Yeah.
Or at least knowing where we are. Yeah, it's a good place to start. How about you, Kimberly?
Yeah, for me, well, I usually struggle with congestion, though I'm not today. So I was like, oh, wow, look, I'm breathing so clearly, right? Which is amazing because I struggle with alternate nostril breathing because I feel like it constrict, like just not enough, right? So that, that tells me, but the rest of it kind of felt open. And that's the first time I really felt it down into the pelvic region. I felt like open there. But I think my constriction is more in the sinuses. Yeah.
Good. So 2 parts to that. When you're practicing alternate nostril breathing, which looks like this for people at home, and you close the one side, for you, when you're congested, just don't close it all the way. In fact, you can even imagine yourself doing it without closing it at all, and you actually can. But fun fact, one of your nostrils will be slightly more constricted all the time because it naturally shifts from side to side. I believe it's every 90 minutes to 2 hours. And so it'd be interesting to hear if viewers were like, oh yeah, my right side feels more open. Oh yeah, my left side. And that is just a natural brain chemistry, body function. It's just one of those rhythms.
Oh, interesting. I'm wondering if that has anything to do with lymphatic drainage.
Oh, my other favorite topic. So a lot of times breathing does impact the lymphatic because actually a lot of those nodes are in and around this area. And so by just diaphragmatic breathing at all, there's actually like a port down near the diaphragm that will help to move things properly. Yeah, it does absolutely. And also too, if you're just constricted all the time, which so many of us are, then that's going to be a factor as well. I'll come back to that some other time.
I would also mention that a lot of our clients have hiatal hernias.
Oh, interesting.
And so there's definitely some component there with the diaphragm, right? And it can be a sliding one, right? Where you don't notice it, like maybe on normal imaging, and it has to be a special kind of imaging where they see it, but there's a structural thing that happens, which I think can keep people stuck a little bit in fight or flight, right? If you're always fighting for air.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that.
How are you on time, Fletcher?
Got all day.
Okay. I don't have all day, but I know a few questions. I want to wrap this up for people. Unfortunately, my internet looks like it's being weird. So hopefully everyone can still hear me. All right. So one of the things that we recommend and that your approach is you're not asking people to do huge overhauls. So why, again, we talked a little bit about this earlier, titrating up. Why is it so important, though, to make those small, consistent shifts? I want to the consistency piece.
Yes. So I personally believe that creating a safe space, not just in your environment, but within yourself is 100% the baseline. And so we can do that through the breath. We also do that through our routine, through our diet. So think about, have you ever been so hungry that when you eat, you're like, oh, I feel so much better now. That's because our body was stressed because it was hungry. And so it also loves routine. It gives us stability. And so if we're eating our meals at the same time every day, then our bodies say, oh, I know that I'm getting fed now. I can make the proper things to help digest this meal. But if we're just eating all over the place and the body says, I need to be prepared all the time, and that's more stressful. And so it's the same thing with dehydration or other things that are impacting us. But the breath is a really key place to start, especially if you are building resilience in the nervous system, and especially if we're moving into exercise when things are going to get, for lack of a better word, jacked up a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay, so you have a program called Rooted. So it emphasizes like breath, grounding, mindful movement, and some additional tools there. Can you tell us a little bit about like who it's designed for and what people might expect? Because if you liked that guidance today, I feel like our audience is going to love that Rooted program. I'm going to throw up the slide I made for it, but feel free to like talk about it freely.
Yes. So as you can see in the visual graphic, the roots are literally growing down. And when I personally think about reverse breathing, stress, anxiety, all the things that yoga is good for, it's this up. And also, as people in a modern world, we are constantly thinking up here, and our energy, and that is, when we do yoga, we want to be embodied, right? But we have to get from here down into the rest of it. And so Rooted is for all of those people that I saw in the yoga class that say, I feel like I'm doing it backwards. And all the people that I saw privately that had a pattern. There was a very specific pattern that was going on here that first began with the breath. And then slowly it was happening in all of these other things. And so we identify through a number of assessments where your breath is, even more than comprehensive than what we did today. But then it teaches you how to very incrementally short, no video is longer than 20 minutes, begin to layer these things in while keeping you in a safe space. The end goal of this program is that you could potentially go to a class of your choosing and feel safe and feel comfortable. And so you could say like, oh yeah, it's a foundational program. It will teach you a sun salutation or these things, but really it's taking a deeper dive. So if you're familiar with yoga, it's going to be a wonderful correction, resetting of the baseline, and unlearning and a relearning. But if you've never done yoga before, then this is going to be a fantastic place for people to start. And as we mentioned earlier, core stability, core strength is something that a lot of people want, are working with. They hear guidance all the time in all types of, classes, but they might not truly know how to do it or what that's supposed to look like. And when they do, it sets them off into this other more undesirable pattern. And so if we can learn to engage the core and breathe and feel safe, then a lot of really wonderful things happen because our body feels supported and it gives us more freedom of movement and immensely reduces a lot of types of back pain, which is not what we're talking about, but having core strength has a lot of trickle out effects that's also beneficial. And so inflammation, I would say, which is a lot of people's pain, is going to be reduced while people are becoming stronger, improving their balance, improving their concentration. That is a huge thing, right? Is people have squirrel mind all the time or brain fog, and this is going to help you essentially become more productive in a safe way. So it's not the I drank 10 cups of espresso feeling stressed, productive. It's moving from a grounded place. So the tagline is rooted so that you can rise. And what I think to myself here is that you're creating a safe container for your body so that you can thrive, essentially. And the Ayurvedic piece comes in because we were talking about the different winds of the breath. And there is one specific wind that is out of balance. And this entire course weaves that in together. And so there will be other things that we talked about in lifestyle, routine, energy that's impacted. So for example, diaphragmatic breathing is also really great for constipation. A lot of core movements and breathing also move the colon. And so if we have this kind of stuck feeling, or the body has, nobody wants to poop when a tiger is chasing them, right? And so you can see how these boxes kind of surround the heart of the issue. And with something that's a very simple program, it actually will ripple out to have many other benefits. And so the yoga is the overarching, but there's lifestyle, diet, routine factors also that will help your body feel safe.
Yeah, I talk a lot about, it's not just what you eat, but it's also how you eat. So there's that's where the lifestyle piece come in. So even if you're, have a limited diet because of MCAS, or you're more sensitive and dealing with sensitivities, there may be some overarching principles of things that could benefit you from a lifestyle perspective. And I loved that there's you talk about the connection between that and the constipation and things like that, because we see a lot of that in our community. So it's down here below, but I'll just throw it up here. If you really resonated with Flethcher and would like to keep going on this path right now, you can find her program at mastcell360.com/rooted is the pretty link for it's easy to remember. And she's graciously given us a 20 for our community with the code MastCell360, or MC360. Sorry. I'm so used to just saying the whole thing. Okay, so let's go back. I know we have a few questions from our audience that I want to get to, as long as we're good on time.
Sure. And while you're doing that too, I also just want to mention from the Ayurvedic perspective that the time of year of fall in the Northern Hemisphere actually increases these things. If somebody has what we call a wind dysfunction versus fire or earth, right? They're all different constitutions. The weather this time of year is up and down all over the place. It's not consistent, and it becomes more dry. There's a lot of different, so if you think about foods with seasonal eating, you notice that people might use crock pots more in the winter where they're eating more salads in the summer. So there's a lot of different things that factor into when we get agitated, right? And we might notice people have allergies more in the springtime. That's associated with a certain thing. But for this specific, if somebody has this constitution, it's probably going to be at the forefront all year round. But there is a higher probability that in the fall, you'll notice an increase of it just because of the nature of the beast.
Yeah. I just want to throw the reminder up. If anyone had any last minute questions that you didn't throw in during the talk, now's your chance. It's on the topic of breathing, and we're unable to answer in-depth personal health questions. So thank you so much for understanding. Okay, so Tracy's asking the difference between dysfunctional breathing versus sleep apnea.
I would say that sleep apnea would fall under this category, absolutely.
Yep. We see sleep apnea as a huge mast cell trigger for some clients, and it can be hidden, right? And until it's addressed, sometimes it keeps them in those flares.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're not breathing and you're waking up saying, because we have to breathe to live, right? And so if we're stopping breathing, that's definitely going to put you in a fight response.
And it'll show up in the body. It ends up showing up in labs and things like that. Elevated cortisol, things like that.
Okay, Teresa's asking, are there apps to measure inconsistencies in breathing? I don't know about an app to measure inconsistencies.
I think that this is an interesting question because it almost tells me that you already have the inconsistencies if you're looking for the inconsistencies. But I would say the best thing that you can do is come up with 1, 2, maybe 3 things that you're observing and start watching them yourself. And if you wanted to, you could even jot it down a certain time of day, like journal about it and say, okay, at 9 a.m. this morning, I noticed this. Tomorrow I noticed this. The next day I noticed this. And that could give you more of a baseline. There probably is. I'm just not familiar.
Amber wrote, maybe Amber was answering Teresa. Amber wrote, Visible app is great for keeping track of HRV. So we were talking a little bit about, like, is your HRV, ideally, if you're getting back more into that parasympathetic state, your HRV is going to go up probably, right? So no.
Low. Low is bad.
Low HRV is bad. High HRV is good.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
I use Aura Ring to track mine.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, but if you get into more of if you're able to extend the timing, we talked a little bit about this earlier in the show, so I'm just trying to think back to what we were saying. But yeah, you can just read
the thing is with apps, programs, things that are, you're watching or you're listening to, they don't know where your baseline is. And so they might be telling you, oh, you need to do 6 in, a 6 for your inhale and an 8 for an exhale, but that might not be possible for you. And so then if you can't do it, then you're trying too hard or you feel like a failure. But if okay, actually today I'm at a 2, so maybe I'm going for a 2 and a 4. The apps can be very helpful, but if you're just not quite there yet, then they too can become frustrating or inappropriate. So figuring out where you are to begin with is good, like I said, before trying to make the changes.
Yeah, and Kimberly, I think you could talk to this too, but with POTS, when your heart rate variability be kind of being tracked with an app kind of become obsolete because...
No, because I went and researched this after we talked about this. And so, heart rate variability is not, it's the micro change. Your heart rate should not be a steady thud, 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 thud. It's healthier to have, it's hard to explain. I'm trying to explain it well, and I'm not. What was that?
You want it to be able to change.
Right. Well, it should be variable, like,
Yeah.
but it's measured in microseconds. So if it's really consistent, it's actually, you're going to have a low HRV score because it's the variability that they're measuring and not the change. Versus like a high one. And it's interesting because I'm watching mine and I'm like, oh, okay, if you don't challenge yourself at all either, it's going to stay kind of low.
And medications can impact that as well.
Oh, absolutely. And sleep apnea and stress and yeah, all the things. Yeah.
Nobody knows us better than ourselves.
Yeah. Lisa was asking, is there a way to use Fitbit? So people are very curious on how we track our breathing. And I think this is why your course, I'm just going to plug your course. Like you do those self-assessments for to get that baseline. Like you walk people exactly through that. But Lisa is asking, is there a way to use a Fitbit to monitor your breath so that you know what it's like when you're not consciously thinking about it? And I think like it's a great question because awareness is the first step. You have to establish what your baseline is so that you can consciously change it if needed.
My Fitbit is way too old to have those capabilities, so I'm not sure if it does now. But even if you just set a timer for 1 minute to observe yourself, it wouldn't take very long for you to. And then the more you do it, then the easier you can begin to make those observations. But it doesn't take very long. I mean, you could be on the phone with a friend and they're yakking along and you could be focusing on your breathing. So it doesn't always have to be an extra set aside time. It could just be weaving it in to, being at the grocery store.
Yeah. And Cam behind the scenes is saying that Fitbit measures how many breaths per minute and HRV. So it might just be what model of Fitbit you have.
Yeah. And Oura will measure that plus oxygen saturation plus HRV. And it learns your baseline while you're sleeping. So no, that's
try my program and see what their oxygen does.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm thinking. Like how does it change? And it notices little shifts like that. So because it gets to know you.
Amber shared when we were doing the breathing exercise that her constriction was in the pelvic region.
Yeah. A lot of people actually just have it. It's almost too tight, right? And then they go to do core engagement and that's already tight. But we want the area everywhere in our body, but especially in this region, to have some elasticity versus being in constriction all the time.
Yeah. And like I mentioned earlier, for me, it was through your breathing exercises that I realized like how involved that pelvic floor is in your breath. Like before I didn't really think about it, but when you're doing core exercises, it makes a lot of sense. For people who are just starting out, and we mentioned like, it might be nice to lay down because your back, and then if you're sitting.
Yes. Even laying on your stomach then too, because you can feel if your stomach is actually pressing into the ground, which it should be if you're breathing in and out, can be nice feedback because sometimes just sensing it ourselves, we don't really know. So using our hands or placing a block on your stomach can be very helpful. And, oh, okay, now I can see what's happening. So that can be helpful too.
All right. Questions, guys. All right. Well, Fletcher, leave everyone. We like to end the show with kind of like hope and little pieces of advice. So what is something you wish everyone with MCAS or chronic illness knew about their breathing and their body's capacity to heal?
I would just say to love their bodies because it's easy to place blame on it, on ourselves, on our environment, and we're just doing the best that we can, right? Even when it feels like we could be doing more, we could be doing better, we're just doing the best that we can. But and sometimes we're just so inundated with information that when we try these things ourselves, certain things are going to work for us and certain things won't, and that's okay. And it's important to learn our bodies, and so that we can begin to gauge what makes us really truly feel better. And so I would just say, love yourself where you are.
Yeah, I love that. Where can people find you?
Everywhere. So my website is Elevate444. I'm on Facebook as Elevate Your Health. Instagram is Elevate.444. YouTube. I'd be happy for people to reach out to me any way that they choose.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. It was so nice to have you on and have this chat. I know the two of us have been looking forward to it. And Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us. Do you have any final words for our audience?
I was just gonna say, start where you are. Start where you are. Just like, Fletcher was saying, if it's not feeling comfortable for you, that breath work, just noticing that and just really tuning in and adapting for you and going slow and steady, because slow is fast, right?
Yeah, baby steps all the way. Slow is safe.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. Yeah, it looks like Jamie froze on us.
Oh, I'm back. You can see me. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.